Sure. Sure. Good morning. I'm Gwen Richard. I'm the Community Development Director here at the Acadiana Center for the Arts. We administer this arts grant that is funded through Lafayette Consolidated Government External Agencies Program. And I do that with my coworker, Anna Kajevnikov. I've been here 17 years as a grants administrator, and I'm a visual artist and an art therapist. So we are going to go around the room and just kind of pass the baton. I'll pass it to Anna, then Anna will pass it to our LCG counterpart, and then she'll pass it to just randomly.
I think that we have maybe not enough time to introduce everybody, but you should definitely introduce Mary Allaire as well.
If people could just say their name and what organization they're with, I think that should be quick.
Yeah, so you will need to unmute for that, but please make sure that you're muting your mics after you do come on and say hi and let us know where you're from. My name is Anna Kajevnikov. I'm the Community Development Manager here at ACA. I've been administering grants alongside Gwen for the last 2 years. And we're really happy to let you know a little bit more about this new cycle of the arts and culture grants through LCG. I'm going to pass it on to Mary, and then yeah, if you each want to just select a person in the list to pass it on to, that'd be great. Go ahead, Mary.
Good morning. My name is Mary Allaire, and I am the grants coordinator here at Lafayette Consolidated Government. It's great to be in partnership with Acadiana Center for the Arts to administer this grant. So I look forward to working with you guys, and I will turn it over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, except I would say that my
Hi, good morning. I'm Elizabeth Sonnier. I'm here to learn about the grant on behalf of the Southern Screen Film Festival. And could we hear from, is it Joanna Devine?
Hey, this is Joanna. I'm from the Current and very much the same, just here to learn more about the grant.
Pass it on, Joanna. Just choose another person.
How about Hannah Bridges?
I think maybe what's going to be easier is if everybody can just use the chat function and just let us know their name and who they're here representing for this. The same way that Michael and Cynthia have done. That'd be great, I think, just so that we can move this along a little bit. Sorry.
No, that's okay. We like for everyone to know who the other players are, because it's good for collaborations.
I think
in the
it's
future.
A little bit
too much today.
It gets hard with the Zoom, but if everybody could just type in the chat where they're from, and that'd be great, and we can start with this presentation.
Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. So we're obviously here to discuss the new cycle of the Lafayette Consolidated Government Grant. And we just want to start off by saying that this grant cycle, there has been some major changes. We have consolidated the grant into one stream of funding. We're no longer doing project grant. We're only doing the operations support grant, and we have increased the maximum and minimum amounts for that. So whereas the minimum used to be 1,000 and the maximum used to be 5,000, we've now increased that to 2,500 as a minimum and a maximum ask of 7,500. And we will go into more details about this throughout the presentation. So the purpose of this grant, we this program is designed to support the arts and cultural organizations who enhance the cultural life of the community here in Lafayette Parish. This is only for Lafayette Parish arts and cultural organizations. So unlike the Louisiana Project Grant, which is region-wide, this is just for Lafayette Parish and only for operational expenses, as we just mentioned. So the program overview, a lot of this information is found in the guidelines, and we recommend that you continue reading those guidelines and referring back to them as you're completing this application, because referring back to all of these points is really important when you're filling out the application. So we're here to foster a vital and resourceful arts community. We want to contribute to the sustainability of arts and cultural organizations here in Lafayette. We're increasing opportunities for local artists by employing them through your organization or programming. We want to make sure that these funds expand access to arts experiences throughout the community. We want to make sure that you're addressing efforts for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And we also really want to encourage new initiatives and expand on existing programming and organizations to build audiences for the arts experiences. The next slide. So the important dates for this cycle, the funding cycle is November 1st through October 5th, which means that any expenses incurred must happen between those dates. And so when you're filling out your application, ensure that any expenses that you identify in your budget, they all fall within these dates. If you're planning on submitting a draft for review, the deadline for that is 2 weeks before the official deadline. So that's July 31st. And we'll talk about what that looks like later on. The official deadline is August 14 by 4 p.m. And then we will let you know whether you've been successful by mid-October. And if you are successful, please make sure that you are available to attend a mandatory compliance meeting on October 26th at 2 p.m. So as we mentioned, this is now only one stream of funding, and it's for operations. So the operations grant can be used for expenses such as professional salaries, benefits for employees, contractor fees, transportation, supplies and materials, telephone, utilities, postage, travel and meetings, rent, insurance, anything that is your day-to-day running of your organization. I've also listed here what this will not fund. This program does not fund capital expenditures unless it's completely fund or will fund the last dollars required for that capital expenditure. It will not fund scholarships, fellowships, or tuition assistance, deficit reduction, any costs incurred outside of the cycle dates, any competitions, pageants, fundraising events, or hospitality costs. This program doesn't fund individuals looking for funding. It only funds administrative costs that are associated specifically with the organization and for the operations of that organization. Any events that this funds needs to be open to the public. And if you're an organization who is a line item on LCG's budget, you cannot double dip. This is the same pool of funding. And so you will have access to a separate application form, which you should have already received. Do we have any questions so far? You can either put them in the chat or unmute yourselves. And feel free to just add questions in there, and I can try to answer them as we go.
So what happens when our fiscal year doesn't coincide with the grant year?
So the fiscal year, we ask you to identify what your fiscal year is in the budget. So you'll be able to tell us what that means.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but like but those expenses still need to occur within that cycle, those cycle dates. But we can definitely look at the budget and see how that might work. So to be eligible for this program, you must be a 501c3 nonprofit arts and cultural organization, and your mission needs to directly reflect that. So we need to be able to identify your status by looking at your mission. So you must be a 501c3, you must have been in existence for at least a year, and we can talk about what that actually means as well. You need to be governed by a board of directors that meets at least quarterly, and you must have an active FEI number when you're submitting.
Hannah Bridges has a message for everyone, or a chat, and she said, I own and operate the Bloom Lit Path, originally from South California, but have lived in Lafayette for 3 years, following family roots. You have to be, your 501c3 has to be with the Lafayette address in order to qualify. You have to make sure that the organization that's applying has been registered with the Secretary of State and that has a 501c3 that has a Lafayette address. Hopefully that answers the question on that one.
Yeah, so organizations that are eligible to apply include individuals, as I mentioned before, any for-profit businesses, and as I also mentioned, any nonprofits, arts and cultural organizations who are receiving line item support. You're already receiving that support, and this is the same pool of funding. So, so this is not the application for you. Anybody who's been non-compliant in past cycles, you will be ineligible to apply. But if you have any questions about that, please reach out to either myself or Gwen, and we'll be able to talk you through that. And any organization that is not in good standing with the Louisiana State Secretary of State or the legislative auditor. So you can actually check your status by heading to sos.gov.la, or is that .la.gov?
I have a question.
Yep.
The Secretary of State certification letter, how recent does that have to be?
We just ask that you actually head to the SOS website, and you can provide like a screen print of the current status.
Because I have a letter from September of 2022. Is that recent enough, or do I need to go to the website and get a new one?
What happens is that 2022 letter is current as long as you're active. So what Anna's talking about is when you go online and you look at your current situation, it'll say active or inactive. You become inactive if you're not.
Yeah, let me show you what that looks like. So if we head to SOS and we go to search for Louisiana business filings, and I can type in Acadiana Center for the Arts. So here we have a status of acting and in good standing, and our last report was filed on March 14 of this year. So we need to be able to, like, if you can just print this screen and show us that you're in good standing as recently as possible. That's what we need to see. And we will be double checking. So if your certificate from 3 years ago is what you submit, we will double check that you are in good standing on this end as well. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay. So let's move on to the review process. So when it comes to us after the deadline, we do have a panel assess each of the applications. And what they're looking for is these 3 evaluation criteria, which is organization, history, and programming at 50% weight. And what that's going to be asking you for is the history of your organization, your value, purpose, and goals of your organization's programs and the services and how they further the organization's mission, as well as any artistic merit of the organization's programming. Any programming activities that include productions, exhibits, festivals, educational programs for the current year and projections for the next year. The need and impact will ask you about the community served by your organization's program and services, how the community is involved with the development of the programs and services, how your services impact the greater Lafayette community, and your efforts to increase access, participation, knowledge, and exposure to the arts. And that will be weighted at 20%. And administration and budget will be weighted at 30%, and we'll ask you to address how you plan to evaluate your efforts, needs, and programs, the qualifications and experience of your staff and contractors, whether you have a sound fiscal history as shown in your financial statements, and any efforts you've made to diversify your funding sources and community support. And so before you begin the application, we really encourage you to do the following. Make sure that you read the guidelines before you begin the application, and make sure that you have a copy close by and you're referencing it often, because there's a lot of information in there, and as you're working through it, you'll be able to understand a lot of it differently. Make sure that you're writing clearly, simply, and specifically. So just answer the questions without putting, without adding things that aren't necessary in there. Our panelists read a lot of applications, and what you want to be able to do is communicate very clearly what you're asking for. Make sure that you're using facts, concrete plans, specific goals, and not opinions. Make sure that the budget and the narrative and the provided of services, they all match up. So when you're finished completing your application, just go back and double check that everything that you've put in your budget refers back to your narrative and your providers of services, and that they all match. So make sure that you're consistent, make sure that you're proofreading, and give it to somebody else to proofread as well, because I think that's a really good way to identify if there's anything that doesn't make sense in an application. And also just understand that this is a competitive program. Just because you've applied for this does not mean that you'll automatically be granted funding. And so we do have a new way to apply for it this year. We'll be using gravity forms on our website. And the way that you would do this is by heading to our website, acadianacenterforthearts.org. You'll head up to the opportunities tab, down to organizations, and to the LCG Arts and Culture Operations Grant. And then you'll click on this red bar down the bottom, and you have the guidelines here as well. And I can show you that on the website just so that you can see it clearly. So we're at the website. You know, opportunities up here, down to organizations, and then click on that. And if we just scroll down, we have the important dates, draft review service, and then we have this application, which when you click on it, opens up like that. So before you start as well, we recommend having the following information available for you to input into the application. Ensure that you have details of who your authorizing and official and your chief fiscal officer are. So they're usually the people who, the authorizing official is usually the president of the board or someone else who has the authority to enter into a legal contract on behalf of your organization. And the chief fiscal officer is usually maybe the treasurer or something along those lines. Yeah, Chris, yes, there is a provider of services form, and we'll show you how to access that through the application. And then there's a whole list of other things that just to prove the existence of your organization and that it's 501c3 organization. So the letter determining that it's 501c3, articles of incorporation, as we said, the certificate of good standing from Secretary of State, the bylaws of the organization, a list of your board of directors, a resolution or a clause saying that that you have the permission to submit this application, the annual budget, which is adopted by the board of directors. Oops, excuse me. If your organization has an annual budget of more than 50,000, make sure that you have the IRS form 990, and then the providers of services forms plus any optional supplemental information. And Chris is also asking if there's a template for the board of directors resolution. We don't have a template for that. That's really up to yourself to provide. And it should be the executive, the board president who signs off on that one. So the authorizing official.
It can be in the form of a letter. Just let them put it on letterhead if you have it to make it very official.
Okay. So in the application, these are the types of narrative questions that they will be asking. We want to know about your organizational history. We already covered a lot of this stuff at the start, a few slides back. The community serve, accessibility, who is administering I guess the executive director or whoever is the project coordinator on this grant, any internal evaluations, and how you're going to be using those grant funds. And we will open up the application and go through it a little bit as well, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So when we're looking at the budget page, revenue can mean so many different things, and a lot of this is listed here on the left. Revenue can come from admissions or subscriptions, any other applicant cash, support from foundations or other granting support. And all of these are listed as options in the budget, which looks like this. So this is your income page and your expenses page. And we are asking you for the prior 2 years of your budget plus your forecast for the year 24. And so if, go ahead.
I was going to say, someone asked the question earlier, if the years don't line up with the organization's year, that's fine. This will cover it. That's why we ask for a projection, and then we ask for what's in the past.
Let me just show you here. This is the budget sheet that you can download, and I'll show you where to download that from. But we do ask you what your financial year month and date start is. So you could be telling, it could, you know, if your if your financial year starts in September or it starts in June or January, you just need to let us know so that we know what we're working with in terms of this. And that can be found when you hit the budget section of the application. There's a link here to download the budget sheet just here, and that'll open that sheet up that we just shown you. I recommend that you hit file and export as PDF and save it to your desktop before filling it out.
Mhm. The other thing about the budget I wanted to bring to your attention is make sure that when it's asking, like line number 16, Community Arts Fund, or local agencies, number 17, some for the year 2024, those are going to be projections. You don't know for sure if you're going to get those things, but you're anticipating getting them. So just remember that year 2024 is really a projection because we're not there yet.
And Chris Hayes is asking, is listing in-kind services necessary if they're not included in the budget? No.
It's not necessary, but it shows great community buy-in. In-kind services is important for just showing collaborations, and that's part of the reason why I wanted everyone to kind of say who they were at the beginning, but Anna was right, it's hard to do all of that on Zoom, but sometimes you'll get costs cut, and that will be in kind. In kind is just not cash. It's just services that's being given towards the organization's operations or projects or
I
whatever.
think usually in kind is easier to document when we're talking about project specific work, but since this is operational, it's a little bit different. But if you have specific questions along the way about these things, please just get in touch with us. Gwen and I are available to, walk you through anything.
Absolutely.
So, and then we do ask for supplementals. Again, this is easier when you're like specific to projects, but having letters of support about your organization, having any resumes or biographies of the people who are involved in your organization, just showing their expertise. If you have any additional budget details that you wanted to provide a little bit more narrative around, you can submit that as a supplemental. Any kind of samples of work. So if you're a theatre company and you've just put on a production, if you've got any video or photographic evidence of your work, you can submit some of that. And any kind of, flyers or promotional materials, that type of thing, just to show the panel what type of work you do and give them a good idea of, what you're doing. And then after the deadline, so after August 14, we wait until the deadline before we gather our panelists so that we understand what kind of applications we're getting from which kinds of organizations. And then we will select panelists based off of a few different things, including what kind of organizations are applying, people within the community who have some interest in the arts. Individual artists are usually involved in this process as well, and they will all be from the Lafayette Parish. So all eligible applications, so if you're ineligible, we won't be reviewing them, but eligible applications will be reviewed by a panel of local artists, art supporters, and business professionals who make the recommendations based on scoring criteria. And then we send those to the board of directors, the ACA board of directors, and also send it off to LCG council for final approval. So if you are awarded, please keep in mind that the first payment is 75% of the awarded amount. Please also know that just because you applied for $7,500 doesn't necessarily mean that you will be awarded $75,000. It will come down to the panelists and how they see fit that you are awarded the amount that you get. So you will receive 75% of the grant amount awarded. And then the remaining 25% is only, it's reimbursable. So you will need to have spent the final 25% before we will reimburse that to you. And that will only be provided to you after the final report is received and approved at the end of the cycle.
And one quick thing we have on there, it says 30 days prior to the start of your project. Really what that means is prior to when you need to spend it. And so you might take that word project off, but in other words, let's say you're using it for salaries. So if you're using it for salaries and you know that you're going to need it midway, then 30 days before that, you can request the money. You don't have to request it as soon as you're awarded. You can request it within 30 days prior to needing it.
Okay, and then so technical assistance. We do encourage, especially new organizations who haven't applied for this before, to contact us before they submit an application, just to make sure that your organization is eligible, and that, you know, we just want to make sure that you understand everything that is in the application. We do offer a draft review service. So if you do manage to fill out the application 2 weeks in advance of the deadline, either Gwen or I will review your draft and let you know if we have any feedback on it, just to make sure that you're meeting all of the guidelines and the all of the things that we expect within this program, and to give you your organization the best shot at being awarded funding. So the way to do that is when you have, and even throughout, you should be saving your submission. Personally, I recommend doing an application in a Word document or Google Docs somewhere outside of the form itself. But to save and continue, you would go to the bottom of the form and click the Save and Continue button. And what it'll do is it'll ask you to input an email address that you want that link to be submitted to. Send it to yourself, put your own email address in there, and then forward that to either myself or Gwen, and one of us will help you with some feedback. So let me show you what that looks like on the actual form. So when we head all the way down to the bottom of the application, we have this Save and Continue button. It'll ask you to do a capture. Oh, it didn't do what I was expecting it to do. If you have any, this is why I recommend always putting it into a Google Doc or a Word doc beforehand, just to make sure. Oh, here we go. So the link to continue editing later is here, and you can submit your email address. It'll come to you on your email, and then you can forward that to us. So let's just go back into the form real quick. I just want to clarify the contact person or the project manager is the person who is going to be administering this grant at your organization. So whoever is, you know, will be submitting the final reports or anything like that, that would be that person. We do ask that you put in your city council district number here, so you can look at that in the register of voters. We don't ask for a lot of characters in, we don't ask for a lot of information. We really want to keep this as simple as possible and for you to tell us briefly about the type of work that you complete. And then I did also notice that we already discussed the budget sheet here, and then the providers of services form here. Again, I recommend going to file and export as PDF and saving it to your computer before filling it out.
Can we talk a little bit more about providers of services, Anna, just for a
Sure.
second? So providers of services could be, let's say you're asking for salary to be covered, for any one particular person in the organization. Then you'd fill out a provider of services form on that person. Let's say you have someone coming in to do some contract work as an artist to help with any particular activity that you have. You can use this provider of services for that. Or if you're going to have some work done through a marketing company or something like that. So that's what this is for. This is so that we understanding where the money that you're requesting is going to what person, in that person or that organization or group of business is legit. It's making sure that that organization is local, would be great, Lafayette, etc. Okay. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the end of our presentation, and we really just want to open it up to the floor for any specific questions. Take a screenshot of our contact details so that you know who to contact, and then I'm going to close it down and then ask you all to show your faces if you have cameras and are willing to, ask questions.
Unmute all, unmute us. You can
So
unmute
if we're
yourself.
So Chris Hayes is asking, so if we're just using the grant for operations expenses like our website, postage, media, and not for salaries, we don't need provider of services forms, correct?
No, you do need provider services forms
But
because
if they're not for salaries,
let me ask you, if we're just using the grant for operation expenses like website, yes, a provider service, let's say you're hiring a company or an organization to do the the website.
I think what Chris is
Yes.
asking though is for website is just like maintenance costs, like the yearly costs of maintaining it, not
Oh.
designing it. Yeah.
Okay,
So
right.
if it was somebody designing the website, yeah, we'd want to
Yes.
provide a services form. If it's just for like operational costs of keeping the website afloat, then we don't need a provider of services form.
Mhm. Right.
If work is Chris, you may need to come on and just explain what you mean by if work is all volunteer, if you don't mind. If anybody, I'm gonna assume that what
Okay.
Chris is. Oh, hi,
Couldn't
Chris.
figure out how to unmute. I was pressing the wrong button.
Okay.
Yes, our administrative staff is entirely volunteer. We
Mhm.
only pay our director and our accompanist. Everybody else is just volunteering, but we have an ongoing need for expenses like postage and like the website and media advertising and all of that. So our board of directors, who are all volunteers and unpaid, do this, but somebody needs to pay for all of that stuff. So that's what the grant is for, but nobody's a professional at what they're doing. They're all just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. Do I still need provider of services forms for like the president of the board of directors and our media coordinator and that sort of thing, who volunteered to do our website because he used to do it when he was in college? It's.
Yeah, I mean, that's optional. So, I mean, anything that, if you want to, I think the providers of services, what that does is it shows the panel what kind of experience the people who are operating the organization have, and it just strengthens an application if you can get that information together. But it's really up to you to figure out like what is necessary in that capacity.
Mhm.
So the people we actually pay are the director and the accompanist, and I can do
Mhm.
provider services for them, but the grant's not going to cover their salaries, not even a
That's
drop.
okay, but it will cover part, it could cover part
Mhm.
of their salaries.
Right, even if it's just a small part, that also is very helpful information too, because it helps us to show our funders that we are not getting enough money to cover all the services. So we're aware of that. We know that it's not going to cover everything. Provider services form is mostly for any money that's being used by grant funds, just for an explanation of it. You know, it helps us to explain who or what services are being provided. Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you all for coming along. Mary, did you have anything that you would like to add from LCG's perspective?
I think you covered it all, Anna. Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, so thank you all for coming along, and we will post this on our website for any if you need to refer back to it. But as I said, Gwen and I are available. Please get in touch with us if you have any specific questions. We'll work through them with you. Yeah, appreciate you all coming along.
Anna, did you take a screenshot? We always take a
I
screenshot.
didn't.
I just like documentation.
All right, here we go. All right, well, enjoy your, I have learned that we are ineligible, but this has been very helpful for future grant. Oh, Michael, Michael, you're from AOC, right? Is
Yeah,
AOC?
Michael, yeah, we'll talk later, Michael.
Yeah, I
We'll
think
talk.
okay, so yeah, I think Gwen can talk to you offline about AOC. But yeah, thank you everybody, and please do get in touch if you have any questions before the deadline. And I hope you can all get drafts in before the 31st of July.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye-bye. Mary, you want to stay on just for a second?